So this is a great moment for South Korea and the Asia-Pacific partners, and for NATO, in fact. This is the third straight summit that the Asia-Pacific Partner 4 have been invited. I think it really is just a clear acknowledgement that there's no more geographic silos to our international security conversation. What this really offers is a chance to talk about North Korea, of course, but really to talk about the key issues that are of main concern for the European allies and the United States. And I think this is really important for South Korea because of its global stature, its global importance and prominence, both in security, in the economic area, and otherwise. It's important for them to be in this conversation. So this is a great opportunity to not, especially following on the heels of the North Korea-Russia meeting just recently, for South Korea to explain how that changes the dynamic, to explain also just a month after South Korea, Japan, and China met in Seoul. So it's really a good opportunity for South Korea to offer its perspective and for NATO to share with South Korea some of their perspectives on the global security situation. Well, I think that from a European perspective, of course, they're interested and concerned about the threat that North Korea presents, about proliferation. But the reality is that in Europe, there is not a deep understanding, for lots of good reasons, of what's going on in North Korea and the peninsula and the threat it plays. I think that Putin going there is making the Europeans really say, okay, what do I need to understand? What's going on here? Rather than just check the box. Yes, denuclearization is good. Human rights violations bad. This, I think, is going to move the European conversation about North Korea into a much broader conversation. And the perfect person to start that conversation is President Yoon, to explain, okay, what does this mean for South Korea first and foremost, but what does this mean for Europe? Having this understanding that what's happening in Asia can affect the European security posture is important. And I think South Korea can start that conversation. And they've put in hundreds of millions of dollars in humanitarian aid. They signed on to numerous sanctions regimes. South Korea has done a lot, has pledged to do more, but I can't overstate the fact that the number of times we talked about, okay, what about even more? Because everyone knows that South Korea is an extremely capable nation as far as defense production. They're exporting $14 billion last year of very advanced equipment, and a lot of the equipment is the exact type of equipment that the Ukrainians could use, whether it's air defense or artillery or shells or otherwise. So not only does South Korea have a lot of articles of defense articles that potentially could send, but they also have a means of production which is far ahead of what is in Europe. So this is of prime concern, and South Korea, if they make the decision, it would be critical. I personally think that now is the time for them to make that decision. I think so. I mean, certainly it has in my calculus and my perspective. I think that, as you mentioned, discussions are ongoing. As you said, National Security Advisor Zhang said he has made these statements. We're very supportive of this, and I think if I were advising the U.S., would say, look, South Korea is going to do everything they can. They understand the situation, and just keep the phone ready. But yes, I think that the Putin-Kim meeting did change things. I mean, the meeting, as well as the munitions that have been going back and forth across that border. South Korea shares our values, shares European values. And I think also this is a natural progression for South Korean government and people to think about supporting a country that's getting overrun by a large neighbor. South Korea had this exact experience in 1950. We're first and foremost Korea's only ally. We were there in 1950, and we've been there, and we're still there. But I think it's important also to remember that there's a United Nations command with numerous countries that is still in South Korea that's dedicated to upholding the armistice agreement. So I think before we think about, will NATO countries come, and I don't think there should be any link, like should South Korea do this, then you get this. This is, I think, the, wrong way to look at it. I think instead, if South Korea wants the security blanket of NATO support in a potential crisis, well, what's the way to get to that point? Well, cooperate more. Go to the summit. This is exactly the right path. Look at what does this look like in several years after we've built that, further cooperation on transnational threats, cyber and otherwise. There more and more cooperation is happening, but there's a lot more that can be done.